Okay, well, I've got 675 more questions here, but we have some people who came all the way down here to be with us today. So do we have any questions from the audience? Would somebody like to converse with Doug today on some subject?
Oh, yeah, that's
you
good.
Repeat the question.
Yeah,
With the merger between the Toronto and London exchanges, how do you see the markets themselves evolving going forward?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm of the opinion that markets are far too highly regulated, and if we lived in a free market world, that years ago, all the markets of the world would have, out of mutual and self-interest, have joined together in some type of a giant trading pool. So this has been taking too long because of nationalistic and regulatory reasons, and it costs way too much to list a stock on an exchange and to take a stock public. It's way too expensive. You have to print up prospectuses this thick that nobody does read or even can read. It's all a complete waste. Yeah, I think
will it splinter?
I think we probably are, and why not? Because I think the nation state is on its way out. The nation state is a dead man walking. I mean, these ridiculous arbitrary entities, which is almost all of the countries in the world, are completely arbitrary and meaningless, and they're the ones that each have their own little stock markets. So I think it'll all eventually come together, courtesy of electronics and all that, which puts the guy in Chad on the same level as us once he's got a computer. So yeah, I think it's happening too slowly, and it's far, far, far too expensive. Too expensive by 2 orders of magnitude because of all the lawyers and the government and the regulations. Too expensive and
Which
too
actually
slow.
makes this a really good thing, given that we do have the current regulatory environment. The immediate impact of this we see is very bullish. Particularly this one that you asked about with London and Toronto. These are 2 epicenters of resource investing. So for us, people in our sector of the market, this is a very good thing. You don't have to list in London. You're in both places. You have access to both pools of capital, educated pools of capital that are interested in this area. And so to not have to go through the regulatory hoops in 2 places versus 1, whatever the extra costs will be of being listed now, I think will clearly be much less than the cost of a double listing. It's a good thing.
Right.
Yes, sir. Government confiscation, FDR version 2. Do you see it coming? Can it happen? Will it happen? What will it mean for those who hold it? How will you deal with it? How do you prepare for it? A lot of questions about possible confiscation of gold and or silver. Then the ETFs are in we can maybe address that separately.
Yeah, well, the first thing is back in those days, which is to say 1932, 33 when he actually did it, gold was set at a fixed price. Now it's not set at a fixed price. Well, $42.22 an ounce, but that would be theft if they did that. I don't think that would wash. So it's different. How are they going to? That means if they confiscated your gold, they're going to have to set a new price for gold, before or after. That's harder today. And the other thing is it would acknowledge the reality of gold and the value of gold, something which was acknowledged then, but is not acknowledged now. So that would be an overt denial of the current psychology. That's on the one hand. But on the other hand, as we get foreign exchange controls, it's going to become harder and harder to transfer capital from one country to another. And they'll recognize that gold, especially at these high prices, is a convenient way to travel, to take a lot of capital. In other words, a Krugerrand really is smaller and doesn't weigh any more than $50 and $100 bills at this point. And the higher it goes, the more that's going to be true. So I don't doubt there's going to be reporting requirements on transferring gold across borders, which there may or may not be now, depending on what country it is and whether you're valuing it as the $50 nominal value on an eagle or the market value. This is all Kafkaesque Twilight Zone. And there may be reporting on ownership of gold, which is going to be very problematical and very tricky. So, you're going to have to decide whether to put your interests or the government's interests first at some point. And you're going to have to balance that with the consequences of doing one or the other. So, but that's what laws do. They always put you in that position. I don't know, they'll do something stupid.
I can just see it now. They're going to say, well, Pablo Escobar had lots of gold. Obviously,
Yeah.
you know, they're not going to want to admit that gold is money. They'll say,
No,
oh,
it's gonna, no,
only
it's,
those drug lords care about gold.
and
you know,
terrorists and
oh,
drug
yeah,
lords.
terrorists, yes.
But I'm writing 2 novels. One is going to romanticize the role of the drug lord, and the other, the role of the terrorist, to show that they need not be bad guys at all.
You're such a mainstream thinker, Doug. You know, gosh,
I'm
outside the box a little bit.
I'm just trying to amuse myself, that's all.
You know, what would the world look like now if they hadn't done the bailout? If they had let things unwind, and where would...
Well, I guess that's in the You'll Find Out department, and the reason I say that is because in the next couple of years, these bailouts will be pointless, and the old system is going to collapse, except much more. I'll tell you what would have happened if they hadn't done the bailout. What would have happened is this, is that a lot of these big investment banks would have failed, or they would have defaulted on their bonds, and financial institutions, which are far too great a share of the economy, in my opinion, would collapse. Okay, so what's this? So a lot of people that are working in and around these things are going to lose their job. The most important reason that I think they can put forward why they didn't let these things fail is all the banks would have failed. And if you went down to the bank to get $1,000 out, the bank wouldn't have it. The money would have died and gone to money heaven, and your credit cards
or money hell.
Yeah, exactly. your credit cards wouldn't work because you wouldn't have money in your account because the bank would have failed and so forth. So it would have been a period of chaos. Okay, so that would have been bad news. Plus, all the rich guys who had all these bonds and stocks, they all would have lost their money. Sure, that would have been bad. But what's going to happen is going to be worse, because instead of the dollar still existing, but lots of them disappearing through bank failures, what's actually going to happen is the dollar, everybody's dollars, are going to be inflated out of existence for practical purposes. So now, instead of just a couple million people, a few million people being damaged, now you're going to have hundreds of millions of people damaged when all their savings, the most productive people, you've got to remember, produce more than they consume, and they save the difference. But how do they do that? They save it in dollars, in banks. That's really what people do, basically. And if those dollars are destroyed, you're wiping out the most productive people and everything that they've saved. Worse than that, you're wiping out the debt of the governments of the world. Looks great for them after the chaos is over. You're wiping out the debts of the people that were profligate. So it turns justice completely on its head. But I think that's what's likely to happen.
I can hear it coming, Doug.
It's perverse. It is. It is. So it would have been bad, but this is going to be more. It's going to be worse, and I don't see any way out of it at this point. I mean, you've got a lunatic at the control of the elevator. Forget about it. I mean,
Question is SDRs.
SDRs, special drawing rights. That's the IMF's idea of funny money. No, forget about it. I mean, look, these nation states are actually a lot of them are going to start imploding and disappearing. The euro is going to go away. The dollar is going to go away. It's not going to be replaced by an SDR. They don't even have an army, the World Bank, you know?
Yep.
I hope most of their officials wind up hung by lampposts by their heels. So, you know, no, forget about the SDR. This is more conspiracy theory. It's not going to happen. That day is past. I don't want to own any paper currencies. None of them are any good. Some of them are better than others, obviously. I don't want to own the Canadian dollar. I don't want to own the U.S. dollar. The Canadian dollar is backed by the U.S. dollar. No, forget about them. they're all going to reach their intrinsic value. Well, the whole price structure of the world has been distorted and contorted over the long boom that started after World War II.
Sorry, the question was, is there enough physical gold and silver to actually be used as money in a practical level?
The answer is absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, look, the world hasn't changed all that, well, it's changed immensely, and the population of the world, since 1913, to take the US dollar, using that as a base, population of the world was, I don't know, 1.5 billion back then, I think, something like that. Okay, and $20 an ounce was quite adequate for the price for gold back then. So, I mean, no, $5,000 an ounce, who knows? The prices of everything is going to be readjusting, and I'm not even sure how. Prices of labor, prices of raw materials, of food. I mean, look, eventually the price of commodities is going to approach zero, everything, because that's what nanotechnology and other things are going to do. It's, you know, this is all wonderful, and these presentations these guys are making about mining, fantastic and educational. But, you know, in 50 years, when nanotech takes over, this podium is going to be a source of raw materials. You'll throw pixie dust on it, and it'll disassemble it into all of its basic 92 constituent types of atoms, and you'll throw other pixie dust on it, and it'll reassemble it. So, you know, that 3D fax that you'd like to have is just going to be a piece of junk in a museum. So, no, I don't know what the price of... Now, there's plenty of gold. It's just a question of the price per ounce. I mean,
but even if it were limited, let me jump in on that. We already had the technology to deal with limited physical supplies in the hundreds of years in the past. This is what the banknote was, a very sophisticated technology. If there isn't enough to everybody carry a reasonable sized chunk of gold in their pocket, it stays in the bank. And you have banknotes issued, and you can put as many points. This is an interesting, instead of adding zeros to the before the decimal point in inflating your currency, you add points after the decimal point to make it a smaller and smaller piece of gold. If there was really that much need, and in a limited supply, well, it would become more valuable. So you would have to begin issuing notes for smaller and smaller fractions of an ounce of gold. You can do that. You can take it as small as you want because it stays in the bank, assuming the banks are given market trustworthiness and so on. There's no problem here. It's a completely chimerical, created problem.
Yeah, no, totally. But that leads to another thing I've got to comment on. One indication that most of the banks around should fail is, you know, you remember, most of us in the room here remember when there used to be a distinction between checking accounts and savings accounts. There actually was a difference. And in theory, this is a very important point that everybody overlooks. In theory, checking accounts and savings in practice, they're totally different animals. They're not like interchangeable, savings account pays you interest, but now checking accounts pay you interest. No, the way it works is this. A savings account is where you put your capital in the bank for a specific period of time at a specific interest rate so that the bank could lend it to somebody else, and not for consumer goods, to produce new wealth. That's the only way they could really be sure they'd get it back. It's for a specific period of time, okay? That's a savings account. At checking account, the bank doesn't pay you. You pay them for storing your money securely and allowing you to transfer it in and out without coming and getting it and taking it out of the vault. But this distinction is totally lost. It's totally unsound banking. All these banks deserve to fail. Deserve to fail. So I wouldn't have bailed them out even if it would have done any good, which it won't.